Tonight, we're going to explore a story that has been whispered in shadows for thousands of years. A story about women who existed before history began to write itself. Women whose names were erased, but whose presence still echoes through time. This isn't just ancient mythology. This is about forgotten truths, hidden lineages, and the power of what happens when voices refuse to stay silent. Whether you're here to learn, to drift into peaceful sleep, or simply to wonder about mysteries that challenge everything we thought we knew, you're in the right place. So settle in, close your eyes if you wish, and let's travel back to a time before Eden had walls, before obedience had rules, and before the first woman was ever called by the name the world remembers. Our story begins in a desert with a man who sought answers and found far more than he bargained for. Chapter 1. The Whisper Before Dawn. The desert has always been a place of visions. Sand and silence have a way of opening doors in the mind that cities keep locked. The prophet whose name history never bothered to preserve had been walking for 40 days. His feet were cracked and bleeding. His lips were split from thirst. His stomach had forgotten the feeling of fullness weeks ago, but he wasn't searching for water or food. He was searching for truth. The sacred texts had always troubled him. There were gaps in the stories, spaces between the words where something seemed to be missing, like a tapestry with threads pulled out, leaving holes that didn't quite make sense. He had asked the priests about these gaps. They told him to stop asking questions. They told him some mysteries were not meant for human understanding. That's when he decided to go into the desert. If heaven wouldn't answer him, perhaps the wilderness would. On the 40th night, as the stars burned cold and distant above him, something changed. The air grew heavy, not with heat, but with presence. It was the kind of feeling you get when someone is watching you from just beyond your vision. When you know, absolutely know, that you are not alone. He turned slowly, his heart pounding against his ribs. At first, he saw nothing but darkness. Then the darkness moved. It wasn't a shadow exactly. Shadows need light to exist. This was something deeper. This was the substance that existed before light learned to push it away. From that living darkness, she emerged. She was tall, taller than seemed natural. Her hair moved in a wind that wasn't blowing. Her eyes held something that made him want to look away and never stop looking at the same time. They were ancient eyes, eyes that had seen the world before it was broken, before it learned to fear. "You've been calling out," she said. Her voice was like an echo of an echo, as if she was speaking from a great distance, even though she stood right before him, asking questions that make the heavens uncomfortable. The prophet's mouth was too dry to speak. He had fasted for 40 days seeking a vision, but now that one stood before him, he realized he had no idea what to say. She smiled, just slightly. "I am Lilith," she said, "and I have come to tell you what they erased." Now, before we go further, I want you to think about something. Have you ever felt like you were missing part of a story? Like everyone around you agreed on a version of events, but something deep inside you whispered that there was more to it? That feeling of knowing without knowing how you know. Hold on to that feeling, because that's exactly what this prophet felt in that moment. And that's exactly what we're about to explore together. If you're enjoying this journey so far, consider subscribing. We explore hidden histories and forgotten mysteries on this channel, and there's so much more to discover together. Lilith stepped closer to the prophet. The sand beneath her feet made no sound. It was as if she was standing slightly outside of the physical world, connected to it, but not quite bound by its rules. "Do you know," she asked, "why you've never heard of Adam's first daughters?" The prophet shook his head. In all his years of study, in all the scrolls and texts he had memorized, there had only ever been mention of sons: Cain, Abel, Seth, sons who built cities and started bloodlines. But daughters? "They don't speak of them," Lilith continued, "because they don't know how. These daughters were born before the rules were written, before heaven decided that women should come from the rib of man, before someone decided that submission was holiness." She raised her hand, and in the air between them, shapes began to form. Not quite solid, not quite smoke. Images of women walking through an ancient landscape. Women with their feet in dark soil and their faces turned toward an unmarked sky. "7 daughters," Lilith whispered, "born of the earth itself, just as Adam was, made to be equals, not companions, made to choose, not to obey." The prophet finally found his voice. "What happened to them?" Lilith's expression darkened. "They were erased, not killed, not destroyed, simply removed from the story, because their existence asked a question that no one wanted to answer." "What question?" the prophet asked. "If women were made equal from the beginning," Lilith said, "then who decided they shouldn't be?" Let that question settle in your mind for a moment. Who makes the rules about who gets to be remembered? Who decides which stories get told and which ones get buried in silence? The prophet would spend the rest of his life trying to answer that question. But that night, under the endless stars, he learned something that would haunt him forever. He learned the names. 7 names that Lilith spoke into the darkness. 7 names that seemed to vibrate with the power that made the air itself tremble. He tried to write them down later. He mixed his ink carefully, prepared his finest parchment. But every time his pen touched the surface, the ink dried before a single letter could form. Heaven itself, it seemed, would not allow those names to be recorded. But memory is harder to control than parchment, and some memories refuse to die. Chapter 2. The Garden's Hidden Shadow. We've all heard the story of Eden, the perfect garden, the tree of knowledge, the serpent, Eve and her apple, Adam and his rib. It's a story that's been told so many times it feels like solid truth. But what if I told you there was an earlier version? A version that existed before the one we know, before Eve was formed, before the rib was ever touched. There was another time in Eden, a time that the official story skips over, a time when the garden had inhabitants who were never supposed to be mentioned. These were the daughters of earth, women formed from clay and dust, just as Adam was. They breathed the same first air. They walked the same paths between the trees. They were humanity's first attempt before the design was revised. According to the fragments that Lilith shared with the prophet, these women were different from Eve in one critical way. They were not created to complete someone else. They were complete in themselves. Adam met them. This part is important. He didn't just exist alone waiting for Eve. He walked with these daughters of Earth. He spoke with them, and according to some interpretations, he learned from them. They taught him about the plants, about the rhythms of day and night, about the feeling of dirt between fingers and water over skin. But there was a problem. These women had something that made the divine architects uncomfortable. They had questions. They asked why. Why should we do this? Why is this tree forbidden? Why does the voice from above give commands without explanation? These weren't rebellious questions. They were honest ones. The questions of beings created with curiosity and reason. And that curiosity made them dangerous. Think about someone you know who asks too many questions. Someone who never just accepts "because I said so" as an answer. How do people usually react to that person? Often, they find them inconvenient, troublesome, sometimes even threatening. That's what happened to the daughters of Earth. When Eve was created, she came with a different design. She was made from Adam, not alongside him. She was created to be a helper, not an equal. And in that moment, the daughters of Earth became obsolete. They were the first draft that didn't make it into the final version of the story. But they didn't disappear, not entirely. Lilith told the prophet that these women withdrew from Eden. They didn't need to be expelled because they were never really allowed in. They lived in the borderlands, the spaces between the garden and the wilderness, places where the rules hadn't been firmly established yet. And there, in those twilight spaces, they continued to exist. They formed their own communities. They passed down their own stories. They remembered what it was like to be made equal, to be made whole, to be made free. If you're finding this story fascinating, hit that like button. It helps more people discover these hidden histories. And trust me, there are so many more mysteries we're going to explore together. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. These daughters of Earth had children, not with Adam, but through ways that the texts don't quite explain. Some traditions speak of them mingling with beings called Watchers. Others suggest they had a form of reproduction that didn't require the union we understand. Whatever the truth, their lineage continued. It flowed through generations like an underground river, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden, but never truly stopped. Throughout history, there have been women who didn't quite fit, women who knew things they shouldn't know, women who could heal without training, women who spoke in languages they'd never learned, women who had dreams that came true and visions that terrified the people around them. What if those women were carrying the bloodline of the daughters of Earth? What if that ancient DNA was still expressing itself, generation after generation, in women who felt like they didn't belong in the world that had been built? The mystics have a term for this. They call it the inheritance of the unnamed. It's the idea that some knowledge passes through the blood rather than through books, that some truths are remembered by the body even when the mind has forgotten. And according to Lilith, this inheritance was not random. It was intentional. The daughters of Earth knew they would be erased from history, so they embedded their truth in a different way, not in words that could be burned, but in bloodlines that could not be destroyed. Every few generations, a daughter would be born who carried a stronger dose of that original inheritance. She would feel the pull of something ancient. She would have experiences that others couldn't explain. And she would spend her life either suppressing that truth or seeking to understand it. The question that haunts this story is simple. What happened when one of those daughters decided to seek? Chapter 3. The Pact Beneath the Eclipse. There are moments in history when the world holds its breath, moments when the veil between what is seen and what is unseen grows thin. The first total eclipse that fell across the earth was one of those moments. Imagine the terror of that first darkness. No one had ever seen the sun disappear before. No one knew it would come back. In that shadow, as day turned to night in the middle of the afternoon, something gathered. The daughters of Earth, scattered across the wild places beyond Eden, felt the call. It wasn't a voice exactly. It was more like a knowing, a deep certainty that they needed to come together, that something important was about to happen. They traveled from the north and south, from the forests and the dry places, from the coastlands and the mountain valleys. They came alone and in small groups, until dozens of them stood together in a clearing that seemed to exist outside of normal geography. And there, waiting for them, was Lilith. She had been the first to walk away from the design, the first to say no to the role she'd been assigned. And now, she stood before the daughters of Earth, her sisters in refusal, with a proposition. "They will erase us," Lilith said, her voice carrying across the gathered women. "They will write their histories and we will not be in them. They will tell their stories and we will become ghosts at best, demons at worst." The women stood silent. They knew she was right. They could already feel the pressure of forgetting, the weight of a world trying to reshape itself around a different narrative. "But," Lilith continued, "we can leave something behind, not in words, not in monuments, but in the blood itself, in the souls that carry our memory forward into every generation that will ever be born." She held up her hand. In her palm rested a stone. It was black as the shadow of the eclipse, smooth as water, and cold as the space between stars. No one knew where she had gotten it. Some said it was a piece of the earth from before creation was complete. Others claimed it was a fragment of the firmament that had fallen. "This is the anchor," Lilith said. "This is where we bind the promise. Each of you will give a drop of your blood, and in return, you will give your daughters a gift that cannot be taken away." "What gift?" one of the women asked. Her name, according to the fragments, was Namar. "The gift of remembering," Lilith answered. "Your descendants will dream of this moment. They will know things they were never taught. They will see through lies, even when everyone else believes them. They will be the guardians of truth in ages that prefer comfortable fictions." Now, pause for a moment and think about that. A gift that can't be taken away, passed through bloodlines, hidden in the very essence of who someone is. Does that sound familiar to you? Have you ever felt like you just knew something was true, even when you couldn't explain why? That feeling might be older than you think. One by one, the women came forward. Each made a small cut on her palm and let a drop of blood fall onto the black stone. With each drop, the stone seemed to grow darker, as if it was absorbing not just blood, but the essence of the woman herself. When the last drop had fallen, Lilith spoke words that none of them had heard before. It wasn't Hebrew or Aramaic. It wasn't any human language at all. It was the language of before, the tongue that existed when the world was still being named. The sky above them trembled. The eclipse deepened. And for a moment, just a single moment, the barrier between the physical world and the spiritual one dissolved completely. In that moment, every woman present saw the future. They saw centuries unfolding. They saw their daughters and their daughters' daughters. They saw women burned as witches and women crowned as saints. They saw women silenced and women who refused to be quiet. They saw an unbroken line stretching forward into a time so distant they couldn't comprehend it. And they saw that the line would hold. No matter what happened, no matter how many times the story was rewritten, the truth would survive in the blood. When the vision ended and the eclipse began to pass, something had changed. The women could feel it. There was a connection between them now, and between everyone who would ever carry their blood. It was subtle, but unbreakable, like a thread woven through time itself. Before you continue this journey with me, take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. We're diving deep into mysteries that most channels won't touch, and there's so much more to explore together. Your support helps these hidden stories reach more people who are seeking truth. The women dispersed after the pact was sealed. They returned to their hidden places, to their lives on the margins of the story. But they carried with them the certainty that they had done something that could never be undone. They had ensured that the truth would survive, not in temples or in books, not in monuments or in official histories, but in the blood and bones and dreams of their daughters forever. Chapter 4. The Name That Burns. In Jewish mysticism, there is a concept called the Shem HaMeforash, the explicit name of God, a name so powerful that to speak it incorrectly could shatter the speaker's mind, a name that carries within it the vibration of creation itself. But there's another name, one that's not written in the holy books, one that exists in the shadows of that tradition, a name that belonged to the lineage of the Earth Daughters. Lilith spoke this name only once to the prophet, and even then, she spoke it so quietly that he almost didn't hear it. Almost. The name, as he heard it, sounded like wind through a canyon, like water over stones, like the first sound a newborn makes before it becomes a cry. It wasn't a word exactly. It was more like a key, a sequence of sounds that, when arranged properly, could unlock something deep in the human soul. The prophet tried to write it down. He tried for years. But every attempt failed. The letters wouldn't form correctly. The sounds wouldn't translate into any alphabet he knew. It was as if the name existed in a dimension that language couldn't quite reach. But he remembered it. Oh, how he remembered it. In his dreams, he heard it echoed. In moments of deep meditation, it would bubble up from somewhere beneath his conscious mind. And every time he heard it, something shifted in him. he would see things he hadn't noticed before, understand connections he'd previously missed, feel the presence of something vast and ancient moving just beneath the surface of reality. He began to notice something else too. There were women, scattered across the lands he traveled, who seemed to respond to that name even though he never spoke it aloud. They would look at him with sudden recognition. Their eyes would widen, and he knew, somehow, that they were hearing it too, that they carried some echo of it in their own souls. These women were the carriers, the ones in whom the bloodline ran strong. They were teachers and healers, prophets and outcasts, wives and wanderers. They had no organization, no church or temple, no formal structure connecting them, but they knew each other. When they met, there was a moment of recognition, a sense of, "Oh, there you are," as if they had been waiting their whole lives to encounter someone who understood. The name was their secret password, not spoken, but felt. It lived in the space between heartbeats, in the pause before breath, in the darkness behind closed eyes, and it carried power. Here's something to consider. What if there are words or names that affect us not through their meaning, but through their vibration? What if language is not just about communication, but about altering the frequency of consciousness itself? Ancient cultures understood this. That's why they had sacred chants. That's why they believed names had power. They knew that sound shapes reality in ways we're only beginning to understand again. The name that Lilith gave to her lineage was like that. It was a tuning fork that, when activated, brought the carrier into resonance with a truth that predated all religious systems. A truth about equality, about autonomy, about the right to exist without permission. Women who carried the name strongly often found themselves in conflict with authority, not because they sought conflict, but because they couldn't help but see through the systems that demanded their submission. The name made them allergic to lies. It made comfortable fictions uncomfortable. It made them question everything. This was both a blessing and a curse. Throughout history, these women were often the first accused when something went wrong. When crops failed or children got sick, when men felt threatened or social orders were challenged, the finger pointed at the women who carried the name. Witch hunts weren't random. They targeted a specific type of woman, the woman who knew things, the woman who spoke up, the woman who didn't fit neatly into the assigned role, the woman who, whether she knew it or not, carried an echo of that forbidden name in her soul. Tens of thousands of women were executed, burned, drowned, hanged, tortured. And with each death, the authorities believed they were stamping out the threat. But the name didn't die. It couldn't die, because it wasn't just in one woman or one generation. It was woven into the fabric of the lineage itself. Kill one carrier, and another would be born. Silence one voice, and another would begin to speak. The name ensured that the truth could never be completely erased. If this story is resonating with you, leave a comment below. Have you ever felt like you carried knowledge that you couldn't explain? Have you ever felt like you were remembering something you'd never learned? Share your experience. You might be surprised how many others feel the same way. The prophet never did write down the name. But before he died, he passed it on, not through words, but through presence. He would sit with women who came to him seeking wisdom, and in the silence between his teachings, the name would transfer itself, like a virus, like a blessing, like a seed planted in soil that was waiting, and it grew. Chapter 5. Daughters of the First Earth. Let's talk about what it actually meant to be a daughter of this lineage. Not in abstract mystical terms, but in lived experience. What was it like to be a woman carrying this inheritance? First, understand that most of them didn't know what they were carrying. There was no handbook, no orientation, no elder appearing to explain their heritage. For most of these women, the inheritance showed up as a vague sense of otherness, a feeling of not quite belonging anywhere. They would look around at other women who seemed content in their roles and wonder why they couldn't feel the same contentment. They would try to fit into the expectations of their time and place and find that something in them resisted, not out of rebelliousness necessarily, but out of a deep, inarticulate sense that something was wrong with the script they were being asked to follow. These daughters often had vivid dreams, dreams that felt more real than waking life, dreams of places they'd never been, of women they'd never met, of events that happened thousands of years before their birth. Some of them dreamed of Eden, but not the Eden of the official story. They dreamed of an earlier version, a wilder version, a place where women walked freely and asked questions without fear, where knowledge wasn't forbidden but celebrated, where the very idea of submission hadn't been invented yet. When they woke from these dreams, they carried a strange grief, a mourning for something they'd never personally lost, a nostalgia for a home they'd never personally inhabited. Psychologists might call this genetic memory, the idea that trauma and experience can be encoded in DNA and passed down through generations. Science is only now beginning to prove what mystics have always known. We carry our ancestors inside us, their joys and their sorrows, their victories and their defeats. For the daughters of the Earth lineage, what they carried was memory of equality, of a time before hierarchy, before one gender was placed above another, before strength was valued over wisdom and dominance over cooperation. And that memory made them misfits in nearly every society they were born into. Many of them developed unusual abilities. These weren't supernatural powers exactly. They were more like sensitivities, heightened perceptions. Some could read people with uncanny accuracy. They knew when someone was lying, not through logical deduction, but through a felt sense in their bodies. They could walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional undercurrents that others missed. Some had prophetic dreams. They would see events before they happened, not in a precise, detailed way usually, but in symbolic images that later proved startlingly accurate. Some had healing gifts. Their touch seemed to ease pain. Their presence seemed to calm chaos. Sick children would settle when they held them. Wounded men would recover faster under their care. These abilities made them valuable, but also suspect, because in a world that didn't understand such things, anything unexplainable was potentially dangerous, and anything dangerous needed to be controlled or eliminated. So these daughters learned to hide, They learned to downplay their insights, to dismiss their dreams, to pretend they were just like everyone else. But pretending takes a toll. Imagine knowing the truth, but having to act like you believe the lie. Imagine seeing clearly, but having to pretend you're blind. Imagine having a voice, but having to stay silent, because speaking would bring consequences you can't afford. That was the burden of the firstborn daughters in every generation. And yet, despite everything, they survived. Some by hiding, some by finding small ways to use their gifts without drawing attention, some by finding each other and creating pockets of safety where they could be themselves. Throughout history, there have been secret gatherings, circles of women who met in hidden places to share what they knew, to pass down teachings that couldn't be written, to support each other in carrying a burden that the rest of the world refused to acknowledge. These weren't witches' covens in the scary sense. They were survival networks, communities of women helping each other navigate a world that wanted to erase them. And here's what's fascinating. These networks left traces, not obvious ones, but subtle patterns. Similar symbols showing up in different cultures, similar stories told in different languages, similar practices passed down through unconnected lineages. It's as if the truth was too big to be contained in one place or one tradition. It had to spread out, to diversify, to ensure that no single purge could destroy it completely. Before we continue, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever felt like you were part of something bigger than yourself? Like you were carrying forward a story that started long before you were born? Drop a comment and let's discuss this together. The daughters of the first earth were not saints. They were not perfect. They struggled with doubt and fear like anyone else. They made mistakes. They sometimes used their gifts unwisely. They sometimes passed their trauma down along with their truth. But they persisted. And that persistence is what matters. Because every generation that survived meant another generation could be born. Every daughter who lived long enough to pass on even a fragment of the truth meant the lineage continued. Until eventually, inevitably, we arrive at the present day, where the daughters are still being born, still carrying the same ancient inheritance, still feeling that same sense of not quite belonging, still dreaming of Eden. Chapter 6. Eyes that see beyond. There's a reason that mystics from every tradition talk about seeing. Spiritual insight is almost always described in visual terms. The third eye, second sight, visions and revelations, the ability to perceive what's hidden. For the daughters of the forbidden lineage, this seeing wasn't metaphorical, it was literal. They saw things that others didn't, not all the time, not in every moment, but in certain states, during meditation, in dreams, in moments of deep intuition. The veil would thin, and they would perceive layers of reality that normally remain invisible. What did they see? Some saw patterns. The web of cause and effect that connects all events. They could look at a situation and immediately understand the hidden forces shaping it. They saw how the past was creating the present, and how the present would inevitably lead to specific futures. This made them valuable as advisors, wise women, counselors. People came to them seeking guidance, and they could offer insights that seemed to come from nowhere. But this kind of seeing had a dark side too. When you can see patterns clearly, you also see when those patterns are leading toward disaster. You see the mistakes people are about to make, the paths they're choosing that will lead to suffering. And the frustrating part is, even when you warn them, they often don't listen. Imagine being Cassandra from Greek mythology, given the gift of prophecy, but cursed to never be believed. That's what it was like for many of these daughters. They saw clearly, but others dismissed their visions as imagination or hysteria. Other daughters saw entities, beings that existed in dimensions adjacent to our physical world. Some traditions call them angels and demons. Others call them spirits or energies. The daughters of the Earth lineage saw them as they were, conscious forces that influence human affairs without being directly visible to most people. This type of seeing was particularly disturbing because it meant discovering that the world was far more crowded than it appeared, that in every room there were presences, that in every moment there were influences beyond the purely physical. Some of these entities were benevolent, guides and guardians that seemed to support human growth. Others were predatory. They fed on human fear and confusion, growing stronger from negative emotions. The daughters who could see these entities had to learn to navigate a complex spiritual ecosystem. They had to learn which presences to acknowledge and which to ignore, which to invite closer and which to banish. This knowledge was passed down through the lineage, not in books, but through direct transmission. An elder daughter would teach a younger one how to perceive, how to protect herself, how to work with helpful forces and defend against harmful ones. But there was another type of seeing that was perhaps the most significant. Some daughters saw the truth beneath the stories. They could read a sacred text and perceive what had been edited out. They could hear a religious teaching and recognize where it had been shaped to serve power rather than truth. They could look at a social structure and see the mechanisms of control hidden within it. This critical seeing made them dangerous to authoritarian systems, because once you can see how control works, it stops working on you. And if you share what you see with others, they too become free from that control. This is why so many of these daughters were silenced, not because they were evil, but because they threatened systems that depended on people not seeing clearly. Throughout history, there have been moments when seeing became contagious, when one daughter's clarity sparked awakening in others, when suddenly a group of women would all start questioning at the same time, seeing through the same lies simultaneously. These moments terrified the powers that maintained order through deception, and so, periodically, there would be crackdowns, the Inquisition, the witch trials, the countless smaller and more personal silencings that never made it into history books. Women declared insane and locked away, women discredited and shamed, women isolated and broken. But here's what the authorities never understood. You cannot kill seeing itself. You can only kill the person who sees. And if seeing is carried in the bloodline, then it simply transfers to the next generation. The gift persists. And in our current time, something interesting is happening. The daughters are starting to find each other through the internet, through books, through chance encounters that feel like destiny. Women who carry this inheritance are connecting in ways that weren't possible in previous generations. They're comparing notes, realizing they've had similar experiences, validating each other's perceptions, building networks of support, and as they connect, the seeing intensifies. Because when people who perceive clearly come together, they amplify each other's gifts. What one sees dimly, another sees clearly. What confuses one, another can explain. We might be living in a time when the scattered daughters of the Earth lineage are finally reassembling, when the truth that was fragmented across thousands of years is starting to become whole again. What do you think? Are you seeing more clearly now than you did years ago? Do you notice patterns you missed before? If so, you're not alone. You might be part of this awakening. Hit that like button if this resonates with you, and make sure you're subscribed, because we're going to explore even more about this awakening in upcoming videos. Chapter 7. The songs that were silenced. Every culture has songs. Songs of celebration and songs of mourning. Songs of work and songs of worship. Songs that tell stories and songs that preserve history. But there are some songs that were deliberately silenced. Songs that were forbidden because of what they revealed or what they invited. The daughters of the Earth lineage had their own songs. These weren't written down in standard notation. They were passed mouth to ear, from mother to daughter, in quiet moments away from the ears of authority. These songs were different from ordinary music. They were designed to do something, not just to express something. Some songs were for remembering. They encoded information in rhythm and melody, complex genealogies, herbal recipes, astronomical knowledge, historical events, all woven into verses that could be memorized and transmitted. Illiterate women who couldn't read a single word could nonetheless hold vast amounts of knowledge in songs they'd learned from their mothers and grandmothers. When the authorities wanted to erase knowledge, they burned books. But they couldn't burn songs. Songs lived in throats and hearts. They could be silenced temporarily, but never permanently destroyed as long as someone remembered. Other songs were for healing. Specific melodies that seemed to affect the body in measurable ways. Chants that would calm a frightened child or ease the pain of a woman in labor. Humming patterns that could lower fever or slow bleeding. Modern science is beginning to understand what the daughters always knew. Sound affects matter. Frequency influences cells. Rhythm can entrain heartbeats and brainwaves. The daughters of the lineage were using sound healing thousands of years before anyone called it that. But the most powerful songs were the invocation songs. These were the ones that called forth presence, that thinned the veil between worlds, that invited guidance from the ancestors or protection from spiritual forces. These songs were dangerous, not because they were evil, but because they worked. They produced effects that couldn't be explained or controlled by the official religious structures. When a woman could sing a song and bring rain, or ease a plague, or restore hope to a despairing community, she had power that didn't flow through approved channels. She was a threat to the monopoly on the sacred, so these songs were forbidden. Women caught singing them were accused of witchcraft. The songs themselves were declared demonic, and gradually, over centuries, Many of them were lost, but not all. Some songs survived in fragments, a melody without words, words without melody, pieces scattered across different cultures, preserved by women who didn't quite remember why the song was important, only that it was. In some traditional cultures, there are still songs that women sing only to other women, lullabies that seem to carry unusual power, wedding songs with verses that hint at ancient mysteries, mourning songs that feel older than the religion that surrounds them. These might be the fragments, the survivors, the pieces of a larger body of sacred music that once belonged to the daughters of the earth. And here's something to consider. What if music itself, not any particular song, but the human capacity for music, is part of the inheritance? What if the reason humans are musical beings is that we were taught by the daughters who came before? What if every time you feel moved by a melody, every time a song makes you cry or fills you with joy, you're experiencing an echo of the original songs that the first daughters sang in the borderlands of Eden? There's a reason that oppressive regimes always try to control music. Why totalitarian governments censor songs and jail musicians. Why religious authorities have often viewed certain types of music as dangerous. It's because music has power that transcends words. It reaches parts of us that logic can't touch. It unites people in ways that frighten those who want to divide. It preserves truths that writing can't capture. The daughters knew this. They put their most important teachings into songs because songs could survive anything. Fire and flood, war and persecution, time and forgetting, songs persist. If you've ever felt moved to sing, even if you don't think you have a good voice, you're participating in this ancient inheritance. You're keeping alive a tradition that predates written language. Don't let anyone tell you your voice doesn't matter. It does. It's part of a chorus that has been singing since before history began. In some mystical traditions, they say that the universe itself is a song. That creation began with a sound, a word, a vibration that organized chaos into form. If that's true, then the daughters of the earth, who were present at the earliest moments of human consciousness, would have heard that original song, and they would have known how to echo it, how to participate in creation through sound. Maybe that's what the forbidden songs really were. Not spells or tricks, but a way of harmonizing with the fundamental frequency of existence itself. A way of singing the world into being, one voice at a time. Chapter 8. The Child Who Had No Name. In all the stories we've explored so far, there's been one figure who remained mostly hidden. One presence that Lilith herself guarded more carefully than any other secret. Her daughter. Yes, Lilith had a daughter. This wasn't a metaphorical child. This was a being born from Lilith's union with forces that existed before the rules of reproduction were established. The texts don't agree on exactly how this birth occurred. Some say Lilith conceived through her own will, parthenogenesis before the term existed. Others say she merged with a primordial being of pure consciousness, and from that union, a child emerged who was part human, part something else. What everyone agrees on is that this child was never given a formal name. Lilith, who had fought so hard for her own autonomy, who had refused to be defined by Adam or any other authority, made a curious choice. She did not name her daughter. Instead, she wrapped the child in silence, not as punishment, as protection, because a name is a handle, something that can be grasped. And Lilith knew that if heaven learned her daughter's name, that name could be used to control her, to bind her, to limit her. An unnamed daughter was a daughter who could not be commanded by the forces that used names as tools of power. So the child grew in anonymity. She moved through the world like a ghost, present but unregistered, influential but unacknowledged. And she had a gift that surpassed even Lilith's considerable power. The nameless daughter could awaken the inheritance in others. Remember how we talked about women throughout history who suddenly developed abilities they couldn't explain? Who began to see clearly, or dream vividly, or know things without learning them? Often, these awakenings happened after an encounter, a brief meeting with a woman they couldn't quite describe later, a conversation they only half remembered, a dream visitor whose face they couldn't recall. That was the nameless daughter. She didn't age normally. Some accounts place her in ancient Sumeria, others in medieval Europe, still others in colonial Africa or pre-Columbian America. She appeared throughout history, always at crucial moments, always to specific women. And her touch, whether physical or spiritual, had the effect of activating dormant capacities. Think of her as a spiritual catalyst. Her presence triggered chemical reactions in the soul that released latent potential. Women who met her suddenly found courage they didn't know they had, or clarity they'd been seeking for years, or a sense of purpose that oriented their entire life. And the interesting thing is, most of them never realized what had happened. They thought they'd had a spontaneous breakthrough, a moment of grace, a lucky insight. They didn't know they'd been touched by something ancient, something that carried within it the concentrated essence of the entire forbidden lineage. The nameless daughter was the living embodiment of the pact. She was the blood promise made flesh. She was the guarantee that the inheritance would never be completely lost, because she personally carried all of it within her being. But there was loneliness in this role. Imagine being ageless, watching everyone you know grow old and die while you persist. Imagine having no real peers. No one who fully understands what you are or what you carry. Imagine being the secret at the heart of the mystery, the answer that can never fully reveal itself. That was her burden. There are stories, scattered and fragmentary, of the nameless daughter's own longings, of times when she wished she could stop. When she grew weary of the endless task of awakening others while herself remaining in shadows. But she couldn't stop, because the covenant was bound into her very existence. She was its living seal. As long as she existed, the promise held. And as long as the promise held, the daughters of the earth would continue to be born, continue to remember, continue to see. Now here's something that might send a shiver down your spine. What if she's still here? What if the nameless daughter never died, because she was never fully mortal to begin with? What if she's still moving through the world, still touching women at crucial moments, still activating the inheritance? If you've ever had a moment of sudden clarity that changed your life, if you've ever met someone who said exactly what you needed to hear and then disappeared, If you've ever had a dream so vivid, it felt more real than waking life, what if that was her? What if she's reading over your shoulder right now, listening through your ears, watching through your eyes? That's not meant to be frightening. It's meant to be empowering. Because if she's real, then so is everything else we've been discussing. The lineage is real, the inheritance is real, the awakening is real, and you might be part of it. Take a moment to reflect on that. And if this story is speaking to something deep inside you, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it, because the Nameless Daughter's work continues through all of us who choose to pass on the truth. Chapter 9: The Rebellion That Never Ended. Let's talk about what happened when daughters of the lineage stopped hiding. Throughout most of history, survival meant invisibility. It meant blending in. It meant using your gifts quietly, helping when you could, but never drawing attention to yourself. But there were moments, brief, shining moments, when groups of women decided that survival wasn't enough. When they decided it was time to stop hiding and start speaking. These weren't organized movements. There were no manifestos or leaders in the traditional sense. But there were spontaneous uprisings of truth. Moments when women across a region would simultaneously begin questioning the structures that confined them. In medieval Europe, there were groups of beguines, women who lived together in religious communities, but outside the control of the church. They studied texts that weren't approved. They discussed interpretations that weren't orthodox. They lived independent lives. The church tried repeatedly to suppress them, but they kept re-emerging. Because the impulse that created them wasn't political, it was spiritual. It was the inheritance expressing itself collectively. In ancient times, there were temple priestesses who maintained traditions that predated the patriarchal religions that eventually suppressed them. These women held knowledge of the sacred feminine that went back to the earliest human civilizations. When Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, these temples were destroyed. But the priestesses, they went underground. They became wise women in villages, healers, midwives, counselors. The knowledge didn't die. It just changed containers. In more recent history, we can see echoes of this rebellion in the women's suffrage movement, in the fight for reproductive rights, in feminist theology, in goddess spirituality. Not all of these women knew they were part of an ancient lineage. Most didn't. But they were responding to the same impulse that had driven the daughters of the earth thousands of years before: the refusal to be erased. And here's what's remarkable. Every time one generation of women speaks up, it becomes easier for the next generation to do the same. Every woman who stood up and said, "This isn't right," made it possible for 10 more to follow. Every voice that refused to be silenced gave permission to 100 more voices. The rebellion compounds, it grows, it spreads, and the forces that want to maintain the status quo are constantly playing catch-up. They knock down one uprising, and 3 more pop up elsewhere. They silence one woman, and her daughters speak twice as loud. It's exhausting for them, but it's sustainable for the daughters, because the inheritance keeps being born. Every generation brings new carriers of the original spark. You can't kill an idea whose time has come, and you certainly can't kill a biological inheritance. As long as humans are being born, daughters of the lineage will appear. Now, In the 21st century, something unprecedented is happening. For the first time in history, women from all over the world can connect instantly, can share stories, can validate each other's experiences, can organize without geographic limitation. The scattered daughters are finding each other, and when they do, they recognize each other immediately, not by external markers, but by resonance, by the sense of, oh, you feel it too, you know what I know, you see what I see. These connections are forming networks, and these networks are starting to remember collectively what was lost individually. Pieces of the old songs are being shared, fragments of the old knowledge are being pooled, dreams are being compared, and patterns are emerging. It's as if the daughters are engaging in a massive distributed memory project, each one contributing the piece she has, until gradually the full picture starts to take shape. This is the rebellion that never ended. It just evolved. It adapted to each era, using whatever tools were available. In ancient times, it was whispered stories. In medieval times, it was hidden symbols and secret gatherings. Today, it's digital networks and shared online spaces. But the core is the same. Women refusing to forget what they were told to forget. Women insisting on the truth even when the truth is uncomfortable. And here's the thing about this rebellion. It's not really about overthrowing anything external. It's about remembering what was always true, reclaiming what was always ours. The daughters aren't trying to seize power from men. They're trying to recover the equality that existed before power became something to seize. That's a different kind of revolution. Not one that replaces one hierarchy with another, but one that dismantles the concept of hierarchy itself. And that's why it can't be stopped, because it's not imposed from outside. It emerges from within, from the blood memory, from the inheritance that runs deeper than any law or custom. Every time you question a rule that seems arbitrary, you're participating in this rebellion. Every time you trust your intuition over an external authority, you're honoring the lineage. Every time you speak a truth that makes others uncomfortable, you're continuing the work that Lilith began. This rebellion doesn't need your permission. It doesn't need you to consciously sign up for it. If you're reading this and it resonates, you're already part of it. The only question is, how fully will you embrace it? Chapter 10: Echoes in Modern Dreams. Let's bring this story into the present, into your life right now. Because this isn't just ancient history. This isn't just mythology or spiritual theory. This inheritance is active. It's expressing itself in contemporary women all over the world. And chances are, if you've listened this far, it's expressing itself in you. Here's what it looks like in modern times. There are women who have recurring dreams of a garden, not the pretty, cultivated Eden of Sunday school pictures, but a wilder place. A place where the boundaries between plant and animal, earth and sky, seem less fixed. A place that feels like home, even though they've never been there. These aren't random dreams. They're memory fragments, ancestral echoes surfacing through the generations. There are women who can't fully relax into traditional religious structures. They try. They want to believe. They want to belong. But something in them resists. Something whispers, this isn't the whole truth. There's more. look deeper. That whisper is the inheritance speaking. There are women who have intense reactions to certain stories or images. They read about witch trials and feel a grief that seems disproportionate. They see depictions of powerful women being punished and feel anger that comes from somewhere deeper than their personal experience. That's cellular memory, the body remembering what the mind has forgotten. There are women who know things they shouldn't know, who can look at a person and immediately sense their history, who can walk into a building and feel the emotional residue of what happened there, who can touch an object and know something about its owner. These aren't party tricks. They're sensory capacities that have been dormant in most humans but remain active in carriers of the lineage. And perhaps most common, there are women who feel deeply alone even when surrounded by people, who feel like they're waiting for something but don't know what, who search constantly for a truth they can't name but will recognize when they find it. That feeling of waiting, that's the inheritance in hibernation. It's dormant potential sensing that the time for activation is near. In therapy, this might be called existential anxiety. In spiritual communities, it might be called the dark night of the soul. But in the context of the forbidden lineage, it's actually a stage of awakening. It's the discomfort that comes right before remembering. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Over the last few decades, more and more women have been having experiences that don't fit into conventional frameworks. Spontaneous psychic openings, mystical experiences, encounters with beings or presences that don't match any religious tradition they were raised in. Some of these women think they're going crazy. They go to doctors who can't find anything wrong. They go to therapists who can't quite help. They feel isolated and afraid. But what if they're not crazy? What if they're experiencing the inheritance activating? What if their pineal glands are starting to function in ways that have been dormant for generations? What if their DNA is expressing capacities that have been suppressed? Science is discovering that DNA can be influenced by consciousness. That gene expression can change based on thoughts, emotions, and intentions. That we're not simply victims of our genetic code, we're active participants in how that code manifests. So what happens when a woman carrying the Earth Daughter lineage consciously decides to embrace her inheritance? When she stops fighting against her unusual perceptions and instead develops them, that's when things get really interesting. That's when she starts to live from a place of authentic power. Not power over others, but power in alignment with truth. She becomes unmovable in her knowing, unshakable in her intuition. She becomes dangerous to systems built on lies, because she can see through them, and she's not afraid to say so. And here's the beautiful thing. When one woman steps into this authenticity, she gives others permission to do the same. Her courage becomes contagious. This is happening right now, all over the world. Women waking up to their inheritance. Women refusing to be small. Women speaking truths that need to be spoken. And they're finding each other through books and videos like this one, through workshops and online communities, through chance encounters that feel like destiny. The scattered daughters are reassembling. If you're one of them, you already know it. You've felt it your entire life. That sense of being different, that feeling of carrying something important, that certainty that you're here for a reason. You are. This is it. Before we go further, I want to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because part of the awakening is connecting with others who understand. You're not alone in this. Chapter 11, The Last Secret of Time. We've traveled far together, from a prophet in the desert to the present day, from Lilith's first rebellion to the modern awakening of her daughters. But there's one more secret, the deepest one. The one that Lilith herself held most carefully. It's about the nature of time itself. Linear time, the idea that past leads to present, leads to future, is a construction. A useful one for navigating daily life, but not the deepest truth about how reality works. In the spiritual dimensions, time is more like a web. All moments exist simultaneously. The past isn't gone, and the future isn't yet to come. They're all present, just in different frequencies. This is why the daughters can access ancestral memories, why they can have prophetic dreams, why they sometimes feel like they're living in multiple time frames at once. They're not moving through time, they're existing across it. And here's the secret that changes everything. The awakening that's happening now isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. What Lilith understood, what she encoded into the bloodline itself, is that there would come a time when enough daughters would awaken simultaneously that they would reach a tipping point, a critical mass of consciousness. When that happens, the entire narrative changes, not just for women, but for all humanity, because the suppression of the feminine wasn't just unfair to women, it unbalanced the entire human species. It cut us off from half of our potential. It made us lopsided, unstable, incomplete. The return of the daughters, the full awakening of the Earth lineage, is actually the restoration of balance. It's not about women rising above men. It's about feminine and masculine energy coming back into equilibrium. About intuition and logic working together instead of competing. About cooperation replacing domination. This is what Lilith saw from the beginning. She saw that her refusal to submit wasn't just personal rebellion. It was a necessary disruption of a system that wasn't sustainable. She saw that eventually, whether in 100 years or 10,000, humanity would need to remember that there was another way, an earlier way, a more balanced way, and she made sure that memory would survive until it was needed. That time is now, all over the world, not just in women, but in many men too. There's a growing recognition that the old systems aren't working. That domination creates suffering. That separation creates conflict. That hierarchy creates injustice. And there's a searching for alternatives, a reaching back toward wisdom that predates our current structures. That wisdom is what the daughters carry. But here's the thing about secrets. They're only powerful while they're hidden. Once they're revealed, they transform into something else, into common knowledge, into shared understanding. So if you've heard this story and it resonates, it's not meant to stay secret within you. It's meant to be shared, not forced on anyone, but offered to those who are ready to hear it. Tell the women in your life about the possibility that they carry an ancient inheritance. Encourage them to trust their intuitions. Validate their unusual experiences instead of dismissing them. And for the men listening, This isn't about excluding you. It's about making space for a truth that's been suppressed. The return of balance benefits everyone. A world where both feminine and masculine energies are honored is a world where all humans can thrive. The last secret of time is that it's not running out. It's opening up. We're entering a period where the past and the future are becoming accessible in new ways, where memories long buried are surfacing, where possibilities previously unimaginable are becoming real. The daughters of the earth are waking up, and when they do, when enough of them remember who they are and what they carry, the world will remember too. It will remember that there was a time before domination, a time before submission, a time when humans lived in balance with each other and with the natural world. And in remembering, we'll create the possibility of returning to that balance, not by going backward, but by spiraling upward, taking with us all the knowledge we've gained, but releasing the distortions that have caused so much suffering. This is the work of our time. This is why you're here, listening to this story. You're part of the awakening. Whether you're a biological daughter of the lineage or a spiritual ally of the work, you're needed. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. Your willingness to remember matters. So as we close this journey together, I want to leave you with one question. The same question Lilith asked the prophet in the desert. What will you do with what you now know? Will you let it settle back into sleep? Or will you let it activate something in you? The choice, as always, is yours. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this ancient and ongoing story. If this resonated with you, please like this video, share it with others who need to hear it, and subscribe to continue this journey with me. There are so many more mysteries to explore together. And remember, you're not alone. You never were. The daughters have been waiting for you. Welcome home.